Canada's ambassador to the UN, Bob Rae, is our guest to talk about all of that. Hi, Ambassador Rae. Great to have you back on the program. I appreciate you making the time.
Thank you, Vashi. Nice to be with you.
We've learned this week that we anticipate Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy will present before the General Assembly. Do you anticipate he'll also speak directly to the Security Council?
I think they're going to try to organize that. From what I understand, he will be speaking to the Assembly on Tuesday, I think, what we've been told. And yeah, it's very exciting.
Do you anticipate, or what do you anticipate around the dynamics between, for example, if there is someone representing Russia present and President Zelenskyy, presenting in person?
Well, I mean, it'll obviously be a moment of high drama. There's talk that Foreign Minister Lavrov will be coming, and that's no surprise. He comes regularly to the UN. It'll be challenging, but it's necessary to hear what they have to say and to get a sense of how this public debate will unfold through the winter and into next year.
There's been a lot. I know there's been 2 resolutions that many members of the UN have voted in favor of, overwhelmingly, but there were a lot of abstentions as well. And I'm wondering what you think about the number of countries, particularly many of which are found in the so-called global South, who are, maybe sometimes rhetorically backing what's Ukraine, but not willing to do more beyond that. Do you think something like President Zelenskyy appearing in person, speaking to them directly, can potentially make a difference, or is it your sense that that sentiment is kind of baked in?
No, I think it will make a difference. I think it's an important contribution. We've been encouraging the Ukrainians to engage in as much global diplomacy as they can. The challenge, Vashi, really is that there's the Russian aggression. There's also the impact of the war on the global economy. And after the pandemic, when many countries were very hard hit by the pandemic, climate change having a strong impact on developing countries, this effect on food prices, on gasoline prices, energy prices, even on food security and food availability, has been very, very dramatic. So there's a lot of countries that would like to see this conflict end very quickly and just say, why can't they just settle? And the reality is that this is a war that's fundamentally about the future life of Ukraine. Ukraine is fighting for its life. So I think is a message that the whole assembly needs to hear.
You outlined some of the issues that so many countries, including this one, are kind of up against right now, right? There's a great challenge economically with the cost of living, with affordability. And I wondered, as you kind of meet to also talk about the halfway point towards the Sustainable Development Goals, if you are worried about the ability to achieve them because of domestic considerations coming up against the need and the expanding need for less developed countries around the world?
Well, I mean, I think we should recognize that the Sustainable Development Goals are goals that were set, by the General Assembly in a vote. And one of the things it's like a budget. You plan for a budget. You don't necessarily plan for a pandemic. You don't plan for a global conflict like the war in Ukraine. So when people say you're off course, you say, of course we're off course. How could we be on course? Just as our governments collectively all around the world ran huge deficits during the pandemic. And people say, oh my goodness, our fiscal plan is changed. You say, what did you expect? Wars do that. But I think it's a critical point for us to say, let's not lose sight of the objectives that we're trying to achieve, the things we're trying to do, because they're about feeding kids, getting kids into school, health for kids and for women, dealing with human rights. These are all part of the so-called SDGs, and we need to keep our focus on these global objectives for the world because they're shared.
And I understand that, and I certainly take your point. I guess what I'm trying to get at, though, is that a lot of what you just outlined requires more money. It requires more developed countries to put up more money at a time when they face a lot of domestic pressures as well. And I'm thinking, for example, even of Canada, where this government had promised to increase international aid every year. And in the last budget, aid organizations overwhelmingly were critical of the fact that that didn't happen. What's the nature of your conversations with our government in particular about the need to do what you just outlined in your last answer?
Well, I think the thing that all governments have to take into account, including ours, is that these problems are not getting smaller, they're getting bigger. And when you look at the impact of climate change, for example, in just natural disasters like Morocco, and then the climate change disaster in Libya, everybody has to understand that this is going to put more pressure on the global system, to which I think, frankly, I think governments will have to respond. No one's asking people to think that government aid on its own is going to allow for the achievement of these development goals. Let's not forget that the private sector has a huge opportunity as well as a great responsibility to participate in the achievement of the goals. So it's not just about governments, it's about what is the global economy doing to invest in development.
Yeah, it's not, I understand, it's not just about government, it's not just about public money, it's definitely about the private sector, but you are representing this government at the UN, right? And this government did make certain promises when it comes to the level of international aid it thought was appropriate even many years ago. As you say, the need has only grown since. Are you convinced that they're willing to do more?
Well, I don't make budgets. The Minister of Finance makes budgets. But what I can't, and I'm not around the cabinet table. Where I am is here in New York and looking at what I see around the world. I look at Haiti. I look at the migration situation in many countries. I look at the crises that we face in development and in humanitarian life, and I don't see the needs going down. I can't report into Ottawa and say, "Don't worry, you can spend less because there's less going on." There's more going on, and we need to understand our obligations that we have made, the commitments that we've made to each other, commitments that we've made to other countries. And I'm sure that will be something that will be taken into account when Minister Freeland brings down her next budget.
Ambassador Rae, I have to leave it there. I'm out of time. I appreciate your time as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
After the break, the road to regulation. Tech titans meet with U.S. lawmakers to talk about the need for artificial intelligence guidelines. What would and should those look like? U.S. President Joe Biden's former advisor on AI, Alondra Nelson, will be here next.